Hey there, and thank you for downloading our student loan calculator slash tracker slash student loan analysis tool. We're going to go through a quick tutorial on how best to use this, including the actual calculation part, the actual tracking part, if that's all you're trying to do is just track your loans. This is a pretty cool tool to be able to do that, see what all your payments are, see what you're paying in interest, see what the long-term impact is of paying interest while you're in school versus not paying interest while you're in school, so on and so forth. Pretty cool tool. I apologize in advance because the tutorial will be a little longer than some of my other calculator tutorials if you have seen those, only because as I started getting further and further into this, I realized to create the most value for you, I wanted to make it a little bit more elaborate than just a plain student loan calculator, which you could almost do the same thing on the traditional loan calculator I already have available for free on the website. So we'll dive into it here in just a second, but before we get started, a quick disclaimer. This calculator is for informational purposes only and should not be considered individual investment, financial, or tax advice. And as always, for personalized advice, please consult a qualified financial professional. And so during this tutorial, we're also going to go through a couple pieces that I would just call like educational in general for those of you that either aren't familiar with student loans and the types of student loans and interest and all those types of things that go along with it. Maybe you have a kid that's graduating high school and is going into college and you're going to be coordinating the student loans for them. Maybe you're one of those high school students that's about ready to graduate, and you're out getting your own student loans and things like that, and you just want to see what this is going to look like for you. Or you have been going to college for quite some time, you already have a handful of student loans, you're probably going to take out some more, and you want a good place to see what that impact is, to track kind of what your projection is for what you're going to start owing and making payments on when you graduate, all in one nice easy place. This template will do that for you. So let's get started. This top portion here, really, you'll see if I scroll down here, then you have the multiple student loan calculator too. But for those of you that are just coming in here and want to see if I take out one individual loan, what's just the impact of a traditional normal student loan going to have on me? I'll show you that here right now, and then we'll blend it in with the rest of this template as well. But there's a few pieces of data entry as far as how to use this template and this calculator. Anything that's in red is going to be required for you to fill in. Okay, everything else will be filled in for you, and then you just use the outputs, the data output for analysis and tracking purposes. Okay, so in red here, we're just going to say this is a student loan we're going to take. Loan term in years or months. For the vast majority of everybody that's going to use this, you would just leave it as years. However, if you're going to change it to a total number of months for this upper portion, you would switch it to months, and then you would switch the loan term. Instead of 10 years, that would be 120 months, right? So that's what you would do here. The reason I left that in there is, let's say you have one loan payment or one student loan left, and you wanted to plug it in here and just kind of see what the results were. That would let you do it if you only had 6 months or something like that. But for most people, it would just be years. I would just recommend leaving it and estimating the amount of years. That's what this number would be right here for the loan term. Then we have to put in our annual interest rate. Again, this is just for one loan specifically. Let's say the interest rate is 7.9%. Then we'll skip this. These are going to be automatically filled in for you once you fill out the rest of this, or as you're going. So next is the type of loan. And so if you already understand the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized, great. If not, just if you do, just bear with me for a second. If not, I'll go through it real fast with you. These aren't all the different types of loans, but for the purpose of this calculator, we're going to either use subsidized loans, which means the government is actually paying the interest while you're in school and during your grace period. So no interest is being accrued and or won't be capitalized at the end of your school and grace period. So when you graduate, you're only going to have to pay the original amount of the loan back for whatever that loan period is. Let's call it 10 years. Okay. Major differences with unsubsidized. You'll see here I have 3 options. With unsubsidized, the government isn't paying any portion of that. You're on the hook for the interest while you are in school and afterwards. Okay, so one of two things can happen. For an unsubsidized loan, You can either pay the interest payment, in most cases anyway, you can either pay the interest payment while you're in school, so monthly interest payment, interest only. So when you graduate, it's just this amount that you owe, right? But to do that, you had to pay, as you can see down here, this automatically populates for you, $115.21 every month while you were in school and during the grace period after you graduate, before you have to start making payments again. You had to pay that much just to keep that loan balance at even with what it was the day that you took it out, okay? Now, the other version of this, and let's be clear, when you click direct unsubsidized, the assumption that's being made on this calculator is that you will pay the interest during the time that you're in school and during the grace period, okay? And so let me define grace period for you. In most loans, most setups, you have a 6-month grace period. In other words, the day you graduate or you stop going to school, either one, you have 6 months from that date until you have to start making your first payments on this loan, okay? So now, the interest is being charged and accrued, and you're paying the interest on a direct unsubsidized loan during all your time in school. So if you start now, this is your first semester of school, and you're going to go to school for 4 years and get a bachelor's degree. For 4 years, you're paying $115.21. Now, at the end of the grace period, 6 months later after you graduate, one of two things will happen. Either you paid during school all of your interest, or in the second scenario for an unsubsidized loan, which is a lot of people do this as well, and most loans have this available for you, you're unsubsidized without monthly interest payments. So you can see here it changes. Now we don't have an interest payment while we're in school, but that interest is being charged and it is accruing for us every single month. And then when we graduate and finish our grace period, it is going to be what's called capitalized interest, okay? So that's right here. So this dollar amount is the interest that accrued while you were in school. That's going to be taken and that's going to be added on to this principal, the original principal amount, and then for the next 10 years, you're going to pay on that higher loan balance due to the capitalization of that interest rate after your grace period. So that's the most expensive option, but we need to be very clear on that, because what you choose for this option right here, the type of loan that you're going to have and how you're going to treat those interest payments for the unsubsidized loans is going to be one of the primary driving factors of how expensive that loan is, and how much it's going to take you to pay it back. Okay, so that's that. So we'll just go ahead and pick. We're going to say we're subsidized. So the government's paying the interest while we're in school in our grace period, and when we get to the repayment plan, we're going to just have to pay back the original amount that we took out. Next two pieces of data that you need to enter here for this calculator up top are your loan date, so the date that you took it out. Now, you should have a loan date on your statement or on your agreement, but just get it close, like within the same month. These numbers won't be exact, maybe for when your repayment comes due, for the amount of interest that was charged, so on and so forth. If this date is off by a couple days or a couple weeks, but it will be close. Probably close enough to at least analyze and make some decisions and get a picture of the impact. Lastly, we want to put our expected date of graduation or expected date that we're going to finish school. Okay. Now, it bases everything from 6 months after that on the calculator, again because of that grace period. So if you choose to start making payments the month you get out after school, then some of these numbers will be a little bit less, obviously, but for the purpose of this calculator and the lion's share of people that have student loans, they don't start making the payments on these loans until after the grace period. Just so that you know. So that's an assumption that's being made in this tab. And then from there, everything else spits out. This graph right here, this pie chart, is just the overall cost of the loan broken down into the principal portion of it versus how much you're going to pay in interest. And then this represents the total cost of the loan for you, just to visually piece it out so that you can see. Obviously, when I go back here and I choose these other options, unsubsidized, again, I'm paying interest while I'm in school. You'll see that that is more expensive than subsidized, obviously. Your total cost of this is going to be $30,552 versus the total cost of the subsidized was only $25,000 and some change. So you can see there's a material difference on whether or not you get a government subsidized loan or whether or not it's an unsubsidized loan and you're on the hook from the interest from day one. Okay. The most expensive version is the unsubsidized, where you're allowing that interest to accrue and capitalize at the end of your grace period, and then you're paying back a larger principal at that same interest rate for that same period of time. You can see that's another $4,000 more expensive than if you were to pay the interest while you were in school. So these are the types of data points that come out of this calculator, so you can make choices and see the impact of your decisions. From there, we go down to what a lot of people will probably be using. This lower section is very similar to that upper section. This portion right here, the expected graduation date, is the only thing from up there that the rest of this chart down here, this table uses. So make sure that you get this right. Now, if you're 2 years into school and you're tracking multiple different student loans and you know you're going to go to school for a whole nother year, you better bet that you need to come in here and make that 2030 instead of 2029 to get a much more accurate feel for what the total amount of interest is going to be, what your what your monthly payment's going to be when you get out of school, so on and so forth. So let's dive down here, just how to use this multiple student loan tracker. You'll see that these are all blank except for this loan amount. This loan amount is what triggers the rest of the cell. So you have to put something in here first. I'll just put 5,000 for the rest of it to show up. Now the rest of it will automatically pop up at numbers that are pre-canned and pre-filled. However, you're going to want to go through here and change specifically all the ones that are in red, so that you can get your own individualized personal loans in here, okay? Now going through the rest, once you get it to pop up and be visual for you, obviously we need our loan date, again, the original date of the loan, because that will tell us how much interest is accruing, that kind of thing. If you want to put your account number in here, you can. The lender amount, if you truly want to track it and just have all of your stuff accessible in one spot, makes sense. I added those fields in there for you. The loan amount we already entered. Your interest rate will be right here. Make sure that that's accurate. Now, in a real scenario, that interest rate is going to be different every semester or every year. A different loan that you take out all the time would be different here. But for the purpose of this, I just kept it all the same. Payback in length in years. Most of them, are 10 years in a lot of cases. Some of them might be 20 if it's like a grad plus loan that has a 20-year repayment or something. If you're in like a doctorate program, there's just different scenarios out there. But put your payback length here in years. The rest of this is all filled out for you until you get over here. Now this is back to where we talked about subsidized or unsubsidized, and these have huge impacts on what happens here. And you can imagine that. Just think if you had unsubsidized without monthly interest payments, you're accruing interest, from 2023 all the way out until 2029. You went to school for, 6 years or whatever, and then that interest got capitalized. $8,640 got capitalized, and so now the cost of this loan is significantly higher than the cost of the loan. Say you were to go, that's $37,000. If that was a subsidized loan, it would have only been $25,000. Do you get what I'm saying? So these are important to get right, to know what kind of loan that you have, to know what day the loan was originated and you were starting to get charged interest, and then to get your graduation date accurate as well. You'll see here in this table, if you scroll over to the right, if it's a subsidized loan, again, it's just this loan amount with the interest rate and the payback period that dictates what your monthly payment is once your payments actually start on the December of 2029 in this scenario that we're using, and what your monthly payments are going to be. There's no capitalized interest and there's no interest payment while you're in school. Now this next loan was only $7,000, but it's unsubsidized, so we do have to pay. We've been paying since 2022, since we've been in school this whole time. We are paying $47.40 a month in interest on that loan to keep that balance right at $7,200. Then when we graduate and get through our grace period, we'll start paying back $7,200 at $86.98 a month for 10 years. Now the last one is $17,500, same as that loan, but we took it out 2 years earlier, and it's unsubsidized, and we just can't afford to pay the interest payments on it right now, or we chose not to. So we don't pay anything on it right now while we're in school, but all of that money is accruing in the background, and a lot of people don't understand that. And when we graduate and get through our grace period, that whole dollar amount is going to be added on to our principal, and then we're going to pay on 10 years interest on top of interest, if that makes any sense. And so that gives you a way to track this realistically. If you're going to school for 4 or 5 years, in a lot of cases you probably get a new student loan every semester. So in 4 years you could easily have 8 lines here, 8 different loans that you're servicing, 10 different loans that you're servicing. Maybe you have some old ones plus some new ones, whatever that scenario is. Again, just a couple assumptions that this is making. This is making the assumption that you are going to wait till your grace period is over to start making payments. So if you went to school and you had student loans from 5, 6, 7 years ago, now you went back to school, this is also going to assume that on those loans, you're not going to be making payments on them, that they're back in like forbearance or in another grace period or something. In fact, if I had old student loans that weren't part of like a consecutive amount of loans that I was taking out, I probably would just leave those off and do a separate. I would download this again or put a different tab on here and do a separate calculation for those, just so you know. But if you scroll down here, I left enough room for probably plenty enough student loans for almost everybody. This gives you an idea. If I just had just these 3 loans and that's all I needed, and I was going to graduate 4 years from now, this is a rough idea of the monthly payment that I'm going to have when I graduate. Okay, this is a rough idea of all the payments I'm going to make, and this is a rough idea of how much interest I'm going to be making on payments the entire time paying back these student loans. So that it gives you a good idea so that you can see that as well. If I had multiple different unsubsidized loans, you'll see down here, it gives me a quick idea of how much interest I'm going to be paying a month in school. So let's just say this was unsubsidized as well. Now that's another $115. So every month while I'm in school until my repayment period, I'm still paying $162 right here, just so that everybody can see that. And so that's this tracker and this analysis sheet in general. I think it's a pretty nifty tool. I wish I had something like this when I was in school and when I was tracking all my student loans. Instead, I just had random statements coming in the mail all the time, and then I was writing it down on sticky notes, like what was owed when, what's my minimum payment, yada yada yada. Another thing I really wish would have been fully explained when I was in school was how interest rate can get capitalized on top of your loan after you graduate if you don't pay any of the interest while you're in school, and that significantly increases the cost of that loan down the line and in the future. So there's a lot of other things that go into student loans, but in general, for I think the biggest casting net of people that I can capture here, this tool will be helpful for tracking the student loans, understanding what your payments are going to be, understanding direct versus subsidized versus unsubsidized, subsidized while paying monthly payments or waiting for it to get capitalized and then paying, kind of the impact that that'll have on you. And then this is a living, breathing document that you can go ahead and use over time while you're in school and then after you graduate, so you can keep tracking this kind of stuff and just have it all nice and neat and in one place that you can either send your kids that are in school, or the kids that are in school can send it back to their parents, so that everybody can have a nice visual and kind of see what they're looking at. It's great for planning purposes, peace of mind, and really analyzing kind of the decision-making process, so you can see how much you can save, for instance, by just paying interest while you're in school, yada yada. So that's it for this tab. If you have any questions, please give me a shout. Let me know. The next tab is going to be a little bit more in depth, a little bit more of an analysis of whether I should pay while I'm in school or not, and we'll drive through that real quick. All right, I'm back. A little technical difficulties there, so switched video. We were over on the loan, just the regular student loan calculator, tab 1. I believe we finished this up, but if there's any questions, just shoot me a message or whatever. By now you kind of get the gist of it. This is a tracker sheet and just a general loan calculator, which is pretty great. The difference when we move on to this next tab over here, the college loan analysis tab, is going to be that you can go a little bit more in depth to this. It's a little bit more of a live document. It gives you an idea of maybe being able to future predict based on some assumptions of, maybe your kid's graduating from high school and they're about ready to go to school, and you want to kind of have an idea of what that loan burden is going to be like over the course of the next 4 years, and then or 5 years or whatever, and then when you hit the repayment period. And so we'll dive into that here real quick. There's a lot of similar attributes to that first tab, but this one goes a little bit more in depth and is utilized just a little bit differently. So I'll walk through all of that here as we go along. Similar to the loan calculator on the first tab, we have to have a graduation date. I put that in red. Again, everything in red needs to be filled out. The rest of this stuff right here is going to be populated for you as you fill out data down below in the sheet. You'll see here there's still a pie chart basically that breaks down the total cost of your loans based on all the information that you put down below, and compares that against your original principal, meaning the original amount of loans that you took out versus all the interest that you're going to have to pay based on your type of plan and information that you put in there. And then we put some other information in here, your estimated annual salary after graduation. And that's a really important piece of this if we're actually going to do an analysis and decide whether it's worth it to go for that degree or not, whether we need to come up with some alternatives on how to finance our education versus just taking out student loans, i.e. maybe we take a year off and work to save for some of that. Maybe there's some other alternatives, like we have to work while we're in school, just different things like that to consider. And so we have to put in our estimated annual salary. The best place to go do that is just do a quick Google search. Usually like the Bureau of Labor and Statistics will give you a good idea of what maybe to expect if you want to go to school to become a pharmacist or that kind of thing. Those ones are usually fairly accurate, but when you start talking about like a business major or finance major, you'll see salary ranges from like $50,000 to $150,000. And a lot of that depends on a couple things. One, where you go to school potentially. Two, whether or not you had internships, stuff like that. There's just such a wide range, of what you could do with those degrees. So just be very careful there. I choose to be very conservative on this as I'm going through this analysis with other people, just so that we don't get overexcited about what our salary would be and then get ourselves into more student loans than what we could possibly be able to afford. And then this next piece, this percentage of income, this will change color based on the answer here. But you'll see over here in my general comments that most experts agree that your payment shouldn't be more than 10% of your monthly salary at the start of your repayment period. So in other words, by the time you graduate and you start having to repay this loan, you should not be exceeding more than 10% of your monthly take home on a monthly payment towards student loans. And that number, I will tell you, is very, very, very hard to meet. You can see in this example, which as we go through this, you'll notice is a very normal example. This person has a percentage of their monthly income going to student loans of 19%. That makes it incredibly hard to buy a house, to settle down and start a family, if you need to finance a car, and to, have some of those more enjoyable things in life, like, annual vacations and things like that. So just something to pay attention to. Just a little asterisk here. We used a 25% tax bracket for the assumption on calculating this number. I feel like that's pretty realistic. Now, if it's lower income, and maybe you have dependents and other exemptions or something else like that, maybe your tax rate's lower. But for single people making 75, 100 grand, I just put that in there as a rough estimate of total tax burden that you'll be paying. So that's where we get these numbers from. But before further ado, we'll keep going down, and we'll make sure that we go through how to use this. So again, similar to the previous sheet, anything that's in red you have to fill out. Now you'll notice I pre-filled a bunch of these out for you just to simulate this example and to give you a head start so you don't have to see where to go. But if you have more loans than this, or if you delete some of this stuff, what you'll notice is anything above a 0 in column E, you'll notice that I highlight that right here as well, then it will populate. So if I just put $1 here, Now I get to use this whole tab. You can edit things like your account number. Your loan date is very important because that will be how much interest you accrue that gets capitalized at the end of the loan, or how much interest you pay during your time in school if it's an unsubsidized loan. And so we'll go through what all that means here in just a second. I just want to show you how to use this tab first. So the important pieces are: make sure you put in the loan date, um, make sure you put in the loan amount, make sure you put in the annual interest rate, or the interest rate for your loan, and the payback period in years. Traditionally, it's going to be a 10-year repayment plan, but if you have something else, make sure that you put that in here, okay? And then again, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, there's three options of the type of loan that you're going to have over here. One is subsidized. Subsidized is a type of loan that's subsidized by the government. So in other words, you don't have to pay interest on all of that money while you're in school and during the grace period, which is typically 6 months. And that's fantastic. Or any other time during forbearance and stuff like that, typically, okay? That's a subsidized loan. That's great. Typically, you have to be low income or something similar to qualify for those loans. The next option is unsubsidized. This is the traditional version of the loan. And then typically they have repayment options here. So while you're in school, they usually offer two options. One, you can make those interest payments while you're in school to make sure that when you graduate, your loan amount, say you took out $17,500, is still just $17,500 the day that you graduate and after your grace period, as long as you pay those interest payments while in school. The other option is you don't have to pay any interest payments while you're in school. A lot of people, especially if their parents aren't paying for it or something, can't afford even the interest payments. That's a whole different debate on whether or not you should even go if you can't afford the interest payments and so on and so forth. That's not the point of this tutorial. Just know that for an unsubsidized, if you click that here, we're assuming that you are going to pay whatever the interest is on that loan every single month until your loan payments become fully due. Okay, that way when you graduate and get through your grace period, you still only have $17,500 left to pay. Versus the third option here, which is unsubsidized without monthly interest payments. So that means you're not going to pay anything while you're in school, but it is an unsubsidized loan, so it is accruing interest every single month. And what happens is at the end of your grace period, after you graduate, all of that interest that you accrued gets capitalized back onto this loan amount. So say, it was $5,000 in interest while you were going to school on this 17,500. By the time your payments come due, this loan amount will actually now be an additional $5,000. Okay, so you'll be looking at $22,500 for your principal amount instead of $17,500. That's the most expensive version of going and getting student loans, is not paying any of the interest while you're in school, letting that capitalize, and then having to pay interest on interest, right? So in other words, the compounding effect of that, you're basically paying the compounding effect instead of getting it in like an investment. So that's how we use this, right? So we're going to put in our loans. Just to give you a practical use case for this, if I have a kid that's going to graduate this year, so this May or June of 2025, and they're going to start school in, let's call it August of 2025. Typically, they'll go to school for 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, so their graduation date's going to be May of 2029. And then I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say, okay, we have a rough idea that we're probably going to need to take out, let's call it, I think in this example we used like $24,000, $25,000 a year to supplement, their tuition, their room and board, their, any other expenses for computers and books and so on and so forth, that mom and dad can't cover, or that they can't cover through working or scholarships or whatever the scenario is. So we're just kind of a rough estimate here, again, making assumptions that the interest rate is going to be somewhere in the 7.9 point interest rate, and we're going to have to pay these all back on 10-year terms. And then we're going to figure, in the fall, we're going to take out a larger portion. And then in the winter, we're only going to need, an extra 7,200-ish or so. This may or may not be realistic. It doesn't really assume for any type of tuition increase or anything else like that. But for the purpose of this drill, we're going to leave it exactly the same. So this is pretty standard. Loan in the fall, a loan in the winter, a loan in the fall, a loan in the winter for all the time that you're in school. You'll notice I only have 4 years here. In many cases, it takes kids 5, 6 years just to get their bachelor's degree, okay? Maybe they slack off, they change their majors, or maybe they just can't get classes scheduled, or they're working part-time or something like that, so they're only going to school part-time, so it takes them a little longer. Just know that if you're an unsubsidized, whether you're paying interest or not, that interest begins as soon as those loans start. So the longer you stay in school, the longer your interest payments are going to go. The longer that if you don't pay interest payments, the higher the amount's going to be capitalized on your loan. So those are all things to take into consideration here. Again, we won't go too far in depth because it's just a tutorial on how to use it. If you have questions about some of these things I'm talking about, you're going to need to Google it, or give me a shout, or something like that, so that we can go through this and I help you understand it a little bit better. But that's how we use this. So now once we fill this out, it automatically populates this loan data down here. And this is where all the information comes, where you can actually start going through and looking at different things, okay? So this takes your loan data, and whether you said unsubsidized or subsidized or unsubsidized without paying interest payments, you essentially get two scenarios, okay? If you, and here's the beauty of it too. Let's go put this one as subsidized. So maybe you start off having subsidized loans, and then your parents make too much money or something else like that, and then you don't get subsidized loans anymore. This can account for a version of all of those. Maybe a few of the loans you'll pay interest on, but then you just don't have any more money to pay interest on the loans that you happen to acquire later on in college. And so you can account for all that. You'll see we click subsidize on this one. So this one removes the accrued interest here, the interest paid in school, yada, 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 and essentially just tells you exactly what the payments are going to be after graduation, if interest is paid in school or if it's subsidized, because that loan amount will be the same, and then total interest payments, okay? I'm going to move back up here and I'm going to change it back to unsubsidized. Typically, if you start unsubsidized, you stay unsubsidized the whole time. This scenario that we're running here, we're going to say, hey, we're unsubsidized and we're going to pay the interest while we're in school. Mom and dad are going to cover that for us. We're going to cover it through a job, whatever, because that's going to be best case from a financial standpoint for us long term for the cost of our student loans and the cost of our education. So we'll go down here and we'll see scenario 1 and 2. So what this represents is scenario 1, which is if we were to go ahead and say that we were going to move all of these to unsubsidized and we were not going to pay monthly interest, okay? That's scenario 1. You can read it right here. No interest payments while we're in school or in the grace period, again, which is typically 6 months. This next one is scenario 2, which is interest is paid in school and during the grace period. That way, when we end that period, we only have what we originally took out in the loans. And that represents the two scenarios here for everybody, okay? Again, if we're subsidized, there's no interest involved anyway until after our grace period, so it's a completely different scenario. You'll see here, if we pay interest in school like we noted above here on the unsubsidized loans, you'll see that while we were in school, our total interest that we paid while we were in school was $20,499, okay? So I realized I had a quick edit I needed to make while I was going through that. So the interest payment that we have to pay while we're in school, you can see that right here. If we're unsubsidized and we're going to pay the interest while we're in school, this is per each loan, okay? And you can see it makes sense why they're the same, each other loan, even though we took them out at different times, because they're for the same amount and we had the same interest rate. Obviously, if we change the interest rate or change the amount, these numbers would change. The thing I had to change was down here where it says to be determined. It was just adding those all up, and that wouldn't have been your monthly interest rate for the whole time while you were in school, because you didn't even take out some of these loans until 2-3 years after some of these original ones. But at the end of the day, these numbers here are accurate. These are what you would have to pay the interest on these loans. Now this one, you would only be paying for 6 to 12 months while you were in school in the grace period. This one, you would have been paying on for 4.5 years since the day that you took it out until you graduated and had a 6-month grace period, if that makes any sense. Really, to be able to tell on that, what you would look at is, again, the total interest that you would pay, and that's the accurate number, because you can see here, you pay $46.75, but since you only took that loan out six months prior to graduating, or 5 months prior to graduating, you're only going to pay that much interest on that loan while you're in school. However, starting back for the original loans, you pay a lot more. I hope that makes sense. Continuing with this scenario 2, Now, when you get out of school, your monthly payment is going to be a lot less than what you can see over here. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom here, you can see this is going to be your monthly payment. This is what this tool is really meant for. If you were to have this student's scenario, which is a very normal scenario, matter of fact, might even be less money than what most kids take out for school, you can see if we scroll back up here, the total that they're going to take out is right about 100 grand. Again, you know, a loan in the fall, a loan in the spring to help cover tuition, books, room and board, all that kind of thing, computers. You'll see here, if you pay interest in school, 20,500-ish of interest, you're still going to have a payment of almost $1,200 a month, which is what most people's mortgages are, or many people's mortgages are, I would say, in student loan payments for a total of 10 years to be able to pay those off. That's if you pay interest while you're in school. Now let's go over here to the other scenario, scenario one. That's if we went up here and we actually said that we were going to have unsubsidized loans, but that we weren't going to be able to afford, you know, all these monthly payments while we're in school. We just simply can't do it. Our parents can't help us out. We don't working while we're in school, whatever our scenarios. Again, people would debate on whether or not you should even go to school at this point then. However, that's not the purpose of this tutorial. But if we weren't going to pay interest while we were in school, we'd have no payments due, okay? So instead of total interest paid in school in scenario two, in scenario one where we don't pay any interest while we're in school, which is what many kids do, especially if they don't have help from their parents, you can see here this total interest paid basically just becomes total interest accrued in school. So it's the same dollar amount. You'll see here. What happens though is that gets capitalized on top of your loan, okay, which then creates a new loan payment for you that's going to be higher because now you're going to be paying on a larger loan balance because all of this gets thrown on top of it after you graduate and get done with your grace period, which you can see now the payment for that same loan is $282.37 instead of $211.40. Now, some of those might not look like a big deal until you come down here and you see the cumulative effect of all of your loans behaving like that. And now you can see that that's what? An extra $250 something a month that you have to pay, which is material in most people's lives, especially when you're first starting off with your career. So you can see the impact on it. In addition, you can see the impact right down here in our analysis, where you can see the total payments made when interest is accrued in school. So this is the total cost of your borrowing if you did it based on this scenario and this plan would be about $173,000, give or take. And over here, you can see that that's close to $10,000 less in payments that you would have to make and total cost of your loans if you made interest payments while you're in school. Now, the difference here could be wildly different depending on how much money you take out, how long those loans are in the interest payment only period while you're in school, and how much gets capitalized. And that kind of thing, they can be wildly different. For instance, if you go to school for 7, 8, 9 years, something like that, and that interest is just accruing that entire time and then gets capitalized, there's going to be a big difference than this. This is actually kind of best case scenario comparison of these two scenarios because you go to school for only 4 years and you start paying it back right away. Interest rates are only 7.9%, yada, yada, yada. So, you know, the difference, I wouldn't say that it's negligible. It's still very significant, but it's not nearly as big of a difference as what it would be in a lot of other scenarios. So this helps you visualize all that. This is the actual savings here. And then this column remains consistent. This is if all of those loans were subsidized, okay? And so you can see the major leg up as far as student loan financing goes and student loans goes towards subsidized loan borrowers, okay? Now, on the flip side, to qualify for that, you know, their family or themselves or whoever, you know, had lower income brackets and could actually qualify for these things. But at the end of the day, nonetheless, they have a very serious advantage and leg up on total cost of borrowing money for going to college. And so let's scroll on up here, talk about a few other things. We filled out the graduation date. We filled out our estimated annual income after graduation. And I wanted to show you this. So this is the same data that happens to be down here for the most part. So as you can see, like total paid, yada, 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 based on what you picked over here for a lot of these loans. And I'll show you what I mean. So like up here, you'll see if I say that, okay, well, I started off in the first year, I actually had subsidized loans. You'll see these numbers shift up here. So now my total cost of borrowing was a lot less. My monthly graduation payment after my monthly payments after graduation are still the same because prior to that I was paying the interest anyway, so I was going to graduate and have to start paying on the same loan balance. But my total interest paid goes way down. My total cost of borrowing goes way down. Now instead of doing that, I'm going to say, well, we didn't pay any interest on any of these first two loans the whole time through. At the time when we got those loans, we just couldn't afford it. And so you'll see here now our total monthly payment after graduation actually goes up because these two loans accrued interest the whole time and then got capitalized on the balance. And you'll see here our overall loan payment goes up. And then our original loan amounts are still the same. Obviously, we took out the same loans, but our total interest paid goes way up, and our total cost of our loans go way up just because of these two loans early on that we didn't pay any interest on, and we allowed that interest to capitalize. So let me go back here. For the most part, this number is going to stay the same no matter what. This just tells you if you were to pay the interest in school on all of your loans all the time, how much money you would possibly save in this example. Now, something else that's a big needle mover on this chart. Let's say it took us an extra year to graduate for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. Maybe we had to work more than we thought. Maybe we were lazy in school. We did a little too much partying. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But let's just say it took us an extra year. Let's watch what the data does in this chart. So now you can see if we were paying interest on it, just in that extra year, it would save us, another $4,000 almost. You can see here that our total interest paid is going to be a lot more. Our total cost of loans, borrowing for school is going to be a lot more. So it is a significant thing when you choose to stay in school longer if you have student loans, and that doesn't even count the opportunity cost of just dragging your feet in school. Again, everybody has different circumstances. I'm certainly not passing judgment on any of that kind of thing. I'm just sharing with you the math and how serious those types of decisions and discussions can be. So let's go through a couple more things here on this, and then I will send you on your way. Let's go back to where we were. This right here, percentage of monthly income. We talked about this at the beginning. I just want to touch on this again. Let's say, you were actually using this to analyze, what your thoughts were on your kid going to school for XY degree, or this school versus this school. That's how you can use this. You can say the tuition at this school, we're going to need to take out this many loans. The tuition at this school, maybe it's a state school instead or a community college for the first 2 years, will cost this. You can run all these scenarios in here, and it will spit back these numbers and tell you, what the percentage of income most likely going to be, what the total cost of the loan is going to be, how much interest you're going to pay, so on and so forth. And again, I just want to bring your attention to this. Most experts say that the beginning of your student loan repayment, that payment amount, which is up here, shouldn't represent more than 10% of your monthly salary at the start of the repayment period. And so your monthly salary is based on whatever you said your estimated annual salary was. And I took away 25% for taxes, and then we took that, we divided this by that, and that's what we get this percentage here, okay? And it's highlighted in red because it's more than 10%. If it was less than 10%, it wouldn't be highlighted in red, okay? And so you can play around with these numbers for your individual loans below and say, okay, if I went to a community college for the first 2 years and it only cost me $5,000 total each year, I'll do a real life scenario on what maybe that looks like. So now that's only $5,000. Oops, sorry, not $5. That would be amazing. $5,000. Maybe I do $1,000 the second semester, and then $5,000 again, and then $1,000 here. And let's see, that gets us to 12%. And then maybe I choose a different school here, and I only have to take out $10,000. Okay. Now I'm at 10%. And let's see here. And here I'm only 5,000 because I'm still at that same school. And then maybe the last year I transfer, or the last year it's a little bit more. Now I'm down to 10%. But now you can see the kind of math that you have to do to get down to that much. We went from taking out $100,000 in loans to only taking out 51,000, and now we're within kind of that range that experts would recommend. The other thing, if you want to do it more simpler, which this is part that I don't really subscribe to because you can see how it can get so far out of whack, is your total amount of student loans shouldn't be higher than your expected first year salary. But we can go back here. Let's just go back a little bit, and we can see why. Why that's a problem. Our expected annual salary in this example is $100,000. Our total loan amount is right at $100,000. So that is what some experts say you're okay with. And you can see that's almost double than the 10%. That's almost 20% of your monthly take home pay is going to go to your student loan payment. Okay. So if you had another 20 to 30%, another range for home loan or rent or something else like that, now you're at 40 to 50% of your income just in student loan and home. That only leaves you another 50% of your income for everything else: food, vehicle transportation costs, clothing, any type of travel, let alone any type of investments, and that kind of thing. So I don't like the 1 year of your annual salary. I just don't think that that's as as um, as safe or conservative for most people. But at the same time, I also fully am aware that the majority of the time it's hard for people to go to school and take out anything less than that in loans and still be able to attend school. So it's tough. It's very hard. In other videos, I'll share my student loan and my wife's student loan journey, which is pretty incredible. And I think a lot of people can learn a lot of things from, but that's not for this video. Looking through the rest of this, again, the pie chart is here. That might be all we need to cover here. You must put in your expected graduation date. Again, a couple things here that really move the needle as well are these loan dates. If you keep taking out loans, or if you take a huge amount of loans right at the very beginning, obviously that's longer that you have to pay interest, longer time to accrue. So the later you can take out loans in your journey on your education, the better for sure, because there's less time for interest to accrue, obviously, and or capitalize at the end. Um, Before I let you go, I just want to end it with a couple things here. This college loan analysis tool and tracker sheet is not perfect. There are some things here that it won't be able to do very well if you're trying to do it, but there are some workarounds. So, for instance, this assumes that all of your loans are being paid back. It's all or nothing. They're all going to get paid back, starting on the same date. And that's going to be 6 months after you graduate or stop going to school, through that grace period. They're all going to come due on that. And the reason I did that is because that's typically how most people service their student loans. They don't just pick and choose to pay a few here and there. It's all or nothing. They're either paying on their student loans or they're not, or they refinance and it's all into one loan. Whatever the scenario is, they typically, they don't come due until 6 months after, because even if you had some previous student loans, you'll put them, they'll be back in forbearance, or they'll be back in some sort of delayed payment schedule if you're in school, and most people choose to take advantage of that. So that's why that's there. Just know that that's an assumption that we're making. That works really well if you're doing student loan analysis for the future. And if you're just trying to track loans, then go back to the student loan calculator and tracker over here, and you can track these multiple loans based on the loan date, the starting payment date, and everything else like that over here. The other thing, I wrote some notes here. So can't use prior loans unless you've maintained interest payments, or you've stayed with no interest payments at all, or you're subsidized. So again, kind of an all or nothing scenario here. So if you went back here and say you're going back to school now, and you threw in some loans back here that you had from like 5 years ago, let's say. Now that would work if they were, in forbearance or something, and they were subsidized the whole time, and so they were never accruing interest, and they were never going to capitalize interest on it. And now you're back in school, and you intend on starting to pay those, or you'll be required to pay those back when you have to pay all these loans back after you graduate. Okay, that scenario, maybe you could throw that loan in here, okay? The other scenario would be, let's say you had unsubsidized loans, and same scenario that I just gave you. You maintain interest payments on that all along. Um, you could do that, but if you paid interest on it for like a few months and then stopped, then those numbers wouldn't be exactly the same, unless you were to go to your statement balance today and get that loan balance as of today and put that loan date as of today. Okay, so you wouldn't want to put it back to 10 years ago if you were paying interest and not paying interest. So I was trying to avoid this conversation because I didn't want to make this complicated, but I think it's important because there are people out there that have student loans from the past that are going back to school and so on and so forth. But again, it's kind of an all or nothing type scenario on here. You want to be consistent with the loans. So if you're in a scenario and you don't want to convolute previous loans with what you might have now, here's what I would do. I would save this sheet. I would run the scenario for now moving forward is what I would do. And then I would go back to this loan calculator up here, and I would just calculate those individual loans, right? And then just put them over here in the spreadsheet or on another spreadsheet to track them, and just add those numbers to this. That's what I would do to keep it clean. I would maintain this one for projecting like while I'm in school or projecting when I go to school, taking estimates. Lastly, I'll just say we've been talking a lot about saying, hey, we're going to start school and then this is what we're projecting and what it might look like, right? So parents using this for their children or something. But let's say you're the student, you're in school, or you're the parent and your kid is already in school. This is a live document. So as time goes, you can update this data and it will fully. So for instance, if you don't do 17,500, you do 22,000. You update this to 22,000, okay? And now it shows you kind of your new projections on what everything's going to cost down here based on the scenario that you're choosing to go. And then the whole 4 years through school, this is a live tracker, live data, and you don't have to rely on getting 5 different statements and adding them all together to see what your loan payment's going to be. You don't have to do any of that. This calculator, this analysis tool will do all that for you. You'll know exactly what to expect. See, by going to 22,000, this took our payment up. If we're not going to pay interest during school, took our payment all the way up to 1513 and took this payment up to 1247. By doing that, right? And obviously increased our interest because it was a larger loan balance. So those are just some of the important pieces of this calculator. I know it's a lot. It's a detailed analysis tool. Ideally, probably I would work with you through this versus you just working through it on your own. But I built this for use with clients and with with sending to people that needed a little bit of help and guidance. So I think if you get in here, you watch this video, you play with these this spreadsheet, this analysis tool, I think it'll be super helpful to do one of two things. Open your eyes to the cost and the expense and have your eyes wide open on what decisions you're making as far as going into school, right? And paying for that education, or give you a big sense of relief of knowing exactly what that number is going to be, knowing that, you know what, you're not in that bad of shape. It seems affordable. It seems manageable, and now you have a plan. I think that's half the battle is just knowing the information and making an informed decision on it versus what 99% of people do, which is they don't make an informed decision on student loans. They're just, I have to have student loans to go to school. It's just a all or nothing type thing. So I'm going to go get student loans. And then they don't actually really plan around it, and they don't fully understand, especially if it's the kid that's graduating high school, going to college. 99% of the time, they don't fully understand the impact of those student loans and what they're going to do to them, not just financially, but life-wise. Again, having to delay starting families, buying a home, those type of things, and what that can really do, the stress that can put you under. That kind of thing. So I think having this tool is incredibly important and useful for everybody. I hope that if you have any questions, you email me, shoot me a text, whatever, and I'll try to help you out the best I can. So appreciate you taking the time to watch the video and download this tool, and best of luck to you.